And stuck in here is another episode of Invasion of the Remake, and today's a Conditions for Your Surrender episode. Jeff wound up doing a couple of interviews out in Lethbridge, the Lethbridge Comic Book Expo.
Lethbridge Entertainment Expo.
Lethbridge Entertainment Expo. And Trish, what do you have to say? Oh, you don't say. That's because Trish isn't here today.
Yeah, we said we were going to be talking comic book conventions, and she said, we'll see you next week.
Although she has attended some, so yeah.
Yeah, she's gone as like a media person, but not really.
Oh no, she's actually she went as a fan last year.
Did she?
Yeah. We went around and she followed me around while I was getting sketches, and then we sat in some panels together. And conventions are a good time, and we're going to talk a little bit about that before we get to the interviews today. But tease everybody what's coming up in this episode. Who did you talk to?
Well, I talked to a great many people, but I'm kind of technologically retarded, and we lost a couple audio recordings. But
I'm going to take the blame for that. I handed him my Tascam, and we changed the batteries, and of course, I'm still new to the Tascam and still learning it, and it reset itself. So he got like 15, 20 minutes of silence, but the smart man that he is, even though we lost a couple of things, he did back them up on his cell phone.
Yeah, and for all of you budding podcast interviewers, I have an iPhone 6, and I just set her to voice memo, dropped her on a table in a noisy convention, and it recorded great. So I was extremely lucky, actually, at the Lethbridge Entertainment Expo to work all weekend with the legendary Jason Mewes, better known as Jay from Jay and Silent Bob in all of Kevin Smith's movies. It was totally awesome. The wife and I picked him up from the airport, and we drove him around and tried to feed him, although he doesn't eat, and hung out with him all weekend and helped him run his table and get to his panels and photo ops and stuff. And he was very kind and let me grill him a little bit on some relevant conversation for the content of our show.
Unlike my interviews a few weeks ago.
Well, your interviews, at least you had questions. I mean, I asked all my nerdy fan questions all weekend when I was hanging out with them outside of the convention. So, and I never think to just turn my recorder on, right? Plus, you don't want to push, right? I'm there professionally representing the Lethbridge Entertainment Expo. So there's a certain way you need to conduct yourself when you work with celebrity guests. And I get to do it a lot because I'm good at it. One of the people who commented to me that I had a very professional manner and was easy to deal with was Mr. Lee Arenberg, who is Pintel from the Pirates movies, as well as a massive character actor. Like, I love him and stuff I didn't even know he was in because he looks so different in each role in every movie. But I got to sit down with him, and he's currently on Once Upon a Time.
Yeah, he's Grumpy.
Yep. So we talked about Grumpy, and I spun my question to make it fit in with our podcast.
And I have watched that series, and I'm not a 16-year-old girl, but I did like it up until halfway after the Frozen stuff. They lost me, but Grumpy's story in that is interesting because he's actually a different dwarf. His name is Dreamy, and his dreams are shattered, and that's where Grumpy comes from. Yeah,
and Lee talks about that in the interview, actually. I haven't seen the show. As I've stated before on the show, I don't have TV.
You don't do TV, yeah.
So I never watched it.
It's on Netflix,
It's on Netflix. Not everything's on Netflix. They have like 10,000 movies. It's pretty shitty. My video store back in the 90s had more than that, guys. Just saying. We talked a little bit about the character of Grumpy and reimagining a character like that and stuff, and he gave me some insight. And just because I got to hang out with him, and he's probably one of like the funnest, most positive, and most interesting people I've ever met. I'll check the show out just to see him in it, but he's a really cool dude, man. Like, he knows everybody. He's childhood friends with Robert Downey Jr. and Tim Robbins, and he told stories of going to parties and having a drink with Nelson Mandela, and he's just like this wealth of industry information, but not being one of those guys that, ever has his name really in lights. He's always like the background guy or the character actor, but he knows friggin' everybody, and he's so interesting, and told a hilarious story at his panel, which I didn't think to record any of them, but he told a hilarious story about shooting pirates with Jeffrey Rush, who is probably the most seasoned actor in that whole show.
Oh, yeah.
And about the monkey, remember the monkey Jack? So they show up and they have that first pirate coin that leads them on their grand adventure, whatever. So the monkey, like, takes the coin and looks at Johnny Depp or something like this, right? Well, the monkey couldn't do it. It was having an off day. So she told us the story of being on set for an extra 5 hours where the trainer was kneeling down out of frame at Jeffrey Rush's feet, and every time the monkey screwed it up, she'd shoot it in the face with a squirt gun to correct the behavior, but she would miss and hit Jeffrey Rush in the face. And being the consummate professional that he is, he stayed level, and he did his, and that's a big monologue that he does in that scene, and he did it over and over and over until they got the shot. And Lee was extremely impressed with his professionalism and said, wow, you really held it together. You didn't freak out. That's great. Like, what's your secret? And he said, well, if I hadn't, we wouldn't be done. And he's right. So, yeah, it was interesting. But so many stories. I could go on forever about.
And shooting on set it's such a long process that, okay, yeah, you got shot in the face with some water. Big deal.
Move
But,
on.
if you had a little freak out, you just set that whole production back a good hour or two, probably.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
When you're staring at 12-hour days minimum, I mean, let's face it, it's rare when you get less than 14 on a set. So you want to get your ass out of there.
Totally do. Funny story about prolonging the agony of a shoot, and it relates to pirates. So my wife and I and her parents, we went to London, England, to visit some family over there, and we decided to take the little river taxi up the Thames to Greenwich Village. Greenwich Mean Time and whatever, right? So we go, and they're shooting pirates at World's End.
Okay, cool.
And we got to go up to the barrier, and if you remember in Pirates, there's the scene where Jack breaks out of the palace looking thing, and he jumps down on the stagecoach, and it's like this grand escape, right?
Yep.
So I'm pretty sure it was a stuntman. Jack, quote unquote, was there. I'm sure it was a stuntman, and it was jumping on top of the thing, and it would bolt, and then all the soldiers would come over the crest or whatever, and we must have watched it for an hour and a half of them just shooting this over and over and over because the soldiers weren't in the right position, and then they drug in crates to have them jump over so it was more dramatic, or the horse wouldn't go and the stuntman would bail, and on like this. And I don't remember who directed that movie, but I remember a guy on a megaphone losing his shit because an extra had his fucking cell phone turned on.
Oh, no, so, in a period piece, that is not
so
good.
Jack, stuntman Jack, jumps down, lands the carriage is moving, the soldiers hit their cues, and they cut, and we're like, what the hell? And he's, screaming at this guy. That guy probably got offset, fired.
Oh, yeah,
he ruined that shot.
Yeah, he would have been fired.
And they didn't start when we got there. So we watched it for 90 minutes. I was completely enthralled because I love movies and the art of making movies and the Pirates franchise. And it was super cool. And I remember the security guard was walking along the fence, and he was making fun of us. He kept going, "Oh, Johnny, I love you, Johnny," to everybody.
What a dick.
Yeah, he was an asshole. But it was really, really cool. So, of course, the following year, the movie comes out. So the wife and I bring my in-laws to the theater, and we go to see this movie in 3D and whatever, and I loved that movie. And the scene that they shot for 90 minutes that we watched, probably 4 or 5 hours of time, 15 seconds maybe on screen. It was so quick. he jumps out the window, hits the carriage, gone, and that's the whole scene, and we watched it forever.
They had to edit out that cell phone. But yeah, that choreography is intense to shoot, and I imagine they had to do that over and over and over again. So
for sure. But yeah, it's really interesting to be able to see, I've never worked on a movie set personally, but to see that from a distance and know the kind of time and energy and coordination it takes to put a film together is pretty crazy. Which is why I have such respect for actors. It's a really hard thing to do, It's like Trish has a hard job. She's a stand-up comedian. That's probably harder.
Yeah.
But, sorry, Trish, you're not here. I'm talking to you, but you're not here. Yeah, so when I get to go to conventions, one of the things that I love to do now is work with the guests, work with the celebrity guests, because I'm, of course, at first a fan, but I love to professionally represent my city or whatever city I'm in, and I make friends with those people. And so over the years, like, I'm friends with a lot of people that I have admired since my teen years watching movies, right? So it's super cool. It's like the best part of a convention for me anyway is that aspect. I've actually only ever gone to a convention one time as an attendee.
Wow. Yeah, it started like that for me too, where I was always there as a vendor. And then I think the first year we decided not to do a big show as a vendor, I went as press. So I worked in a different capacity, doing interviews and things like that. And then I finally got to be the fanboy side of things. I've never been a handler. I have moderated panels before. But yeah, it's fun and exhausting regardless of what side of the fence you're actually on doing it.
Yeah, my wife isn't really a fan. Like, she likes movies and stuff, but she's not a fan to the level that you and I are fans.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for me, she would never go to a comic convention.
Right.
And typically, especially being a vendor, you can get them in, skip the line, right? Give them a vendor badge, and they have free run of the place. So she would come for 4 hours, check out the costumes, talk to our friends, look at the merch. She doesn't really buy anything, and then, she's good, right? 4 hours, she's good. So this was the first time that she had ever worked with me at the Lethbridge Entertainment Expo, because Jason Mewes and his tour manager, Jason West, they flew in really late, and I have the shittiest night vision ever, and I can't drive at night. And I was like, I would be really upset if I rolled my car into a ditch on the way to Lethbridge from Calgary and killed Jason Mewes. I would like to be remembered, but not for that. So I asked my wife, I was like, oh my God, can you drive and bring us down there? And then we were working out a way that maybe, I would come the next morning and that she would come back home or whatever. And I was like, I really need to be that first line of contact with the guests, meet them at the airport, introduce myself, and start building a rapport and a relationship with them, because the organizer, Matt, volunteered me. Actually, I voluntold him. This is a funny story. So the Lethbridge Entertainment organizer is a friend of mine, and he announced Jason Mewes as a guest through Facebook. And I was on him like a dirty shirt, man. I phoned him, and I was like, "Hey, Matt, I'm gonna be Jason Mewes' handler for the expo." And he's like, "Oh, well, he's got an assistant." And I'm like, "Oh, it wasn't a question. I'm telling you, I'm coming to do this." And it's like, "Oh, that'll be great." And then, of course, with Jason West, his tour manager, doing the handling duties, like taking the money and stuff, it freed me up to help Matt in other capacities in the show. So I got to do the announcements over the PA and help the other guests and ferry people back and forth and answer questions and talk to my vendor friends and stuff, right? And my little brother was there selling comics right across from us, so that was fun. And he hooked Jason Mewes up with some free toys, and yeah, it was really cool. But yeah, so Heather had never worked, to get completely sidetracked, Heather had never worked a show before. And for anyone who's never been a vendor or never worked a show, like you said, it's completely exhausting. She was like, "I don't know how you can do this. Like, it's so exhausting because, the show hours are maybe 8 hours, but you're 14 to 17 hours. It's like working on a movie set. You're 14 to 17 hours on your feet, go, go, go. Yep. You're always talking. You're always moving. You barely have time to, hit the washroom or have a glass of water. Like, you're go, 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 right? And,
it's like you're everything goes into long drive mode. Your body shuts down. You might urinate once in that 12-hour span.
Yeah, maybe. There was that year they had NOS energy drink around the corner from my vendor booth, and then I hit the washroom a few times with that stuff. But yeah, you just go, and she was just like, and she was a trooper. She stuck in there, and she worked, and she covered tables. Local voice actor from Dragon Ball, Brendan Hunter, he was there. She covered his table while he did his panel. She hung out. I think she was like feigning work, but she was just hanging out with Billy West a lot, and that guy is great. And unfortunately, he's one of the people that I lost the recording of. But he's so interesting, and his normal speaking voice is Fry from Futurama. So it's really surreal to just be sitting there talking to him, and he just sounds like Fry. Like, he puts a little inflection in when he does Fry.
Yeah.
But that's what he sounds like. In case you ever wondered, he doesn't sound like Zoidberg regularly.
You can just close your eyes. And
every time he does Zoidberg, it's brilliant. Because he does the claw clicks and he does the tentacle. Oh man, it's so good. Yeah, she was completely exhausted and didn't understand that, why I would do it. But she, near the end of the weekend, she was sitting at tables and listening to people ask their questions and say how much they love them and shake their hand to the guests and stuff, right? And she was like, wow, we're really in a privileged position to be able to sit and talk with these people as people outside of the convention experience and really get to know them. And it is a huge privilege. And it's my continual privilege to have organizers that trust me enough to do it. But I love it. And I wouldn't get away. I always say I'm going to quit. I quit in 2011. I had a toy store called It Figures. We did conventions starting in 2004. I opened a store in 2011, and we had to shut it down in 2012 because a physical location in Calgary is freaking horrible as a startup. So I swore then. I'm like, that's it. I'm done. 2004 to 2012, no more conventions. I'm done. I'm hanging up my sneakers, and I'm finished. And I just keep getting drugged back in every time.
Yeah, you got to be a bit of a masochist, and I love doing them too. We're gonna get back into that. I want to ask you about like your worst fanboy experience at a convention, because we all have them. But let's listen to your Lee Arenberg interview first, and we'll be right back.
You knew William Turner? Old Bootstrap Bill. We knew him. Never sat well with Bootstrap what we did to Jack Sparrow. The mutiny and all. He said it wasn't right with the code. That's why he sent off a piece of the treasure to you, as it were. He said we deserve to be cursed. And remain cursed.
Stupid blighter.
Good man. But as you can imagine, that didn't sit too well with the captain.
That didn't sit too well with the captain at all. Tell him what Barbosa did.
I'm telling a story! So, what the captain did, he strapped a cannon to Bootstrap's bootstraps. And last we saw of old Bill Turner, he was sinking to the crushing black oblivion of Davy Jones' locker. Of course, it was only after that we learned we needed his blood to lift the curse.
Yeah, that's what you call ironic.
Bring him.
I'm sitting with Lee Arenberg, who's currently playing Grumpy in the television series Once Upon a Time on ABC. I had a question for you as it relates to the content of our show, which is remakes. The show isn't a remake, but what you're doing is you're revitalizing a classic character. So,
me personally,
in a way, you're remaking the character of Grumpy from Snow White and the Seven Dwarves into a modern context. What are your thoughts on, or your process, for bringing that character to life in a different way than the happy?
Well, you know what's weird? My technique is really simple. I read the script and I do what that says. See what I mean? To find my character.
Yeah.
Like, I understand certain truths about the character from watching the old animated version, but that's not the story I'm paid to tell. So I have that advantage. And then secondly, like, my character, the kind of subtle difference would be that if I remember the Disney character, the original, he was more misogynistic because he wasn't loved. And then when she gets the kiss at the end, he softens, right? Yeah. Well, my guy is sort of born soft and grows hard through having his heart broken. So there's that subtle difference. But he's still like, he starts out as the softie, becomes hardened by having his heart broken. So there's a big difference in the two characters right there, if you will. But basically, I get the opportunity to play my grumpiness based on that romantic notion of no one else deserves to be happy because I'm not happy.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, even the Disney Grumpy is inspired by the original story.
Well, we're all inspired by that, and that's why the show is a hit. And one of the unique things about the show is the way they cleverly have, not ignored what's known to be true about their characters that the audience is always into, and then in that way, the fans of fairy tales feel that the writers of our show are still honoring those classic tales. We're not changing what's the already accepted stuff about the character. We're only changing what isn't in the other story, the gray area, the stuff that tells our parts of the story. But we still honor the legends of the fairy tales and everything Disney. That's what's cool about the show.
And now, is that what they draw off for that show as inspiration? Is they're coming off the wholesome Disney adaptations of these classic stories, and they're putting it into...
Not necessarily. This show's pretty ballsy. I think that's why people like it. Even family entertainment in this day and age needs to have a little bit more of an edge because our kids are more mature and enjoy a little bit more rounded story, if you will. No, because Walt and the wholesome Disney legend was based on these ballsy fairy tales.
Totally.
They're the same fairy tales. And that was one of the kind of neat things about Walt, I think, in his storytelling was that he didn't mind the little bit of the darkness.
Totally. There's some of the grimmest deaths happen in...
Bambi has got to be one of the most brutal movies of all time, right? And it goes down and, people skip it. People skip the opening and start after the mom's dead. Or whatever,
that's
right?
I don't know if you could get away with that with TV now, is if you shot somebody's mom and then lit their home on fire on the way out the door. Is pretty much how that movie starts. My favorite Disney movie is this one called The Black Cauldron, and it's based on some books, and it has the grisliest death ever. The villain gets his skin sucked off.
That's why do you think Disney is so popular? Because he understands what people want to watch. And now the corporation, they still do the same thing. That's why they acquire Marvel. That's why they tell Pirates of the Caribbean. That's why they acquire Lucas and Star Wars.
Yeah, the thing I found interesting about Pirates of the Caribbean, because I'm from Canada and was closed in as a child and didn't know it was a ride, when I saw it, I thought it was just this really creative adventure movie that we hadn't had since pretty much Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
And to find out that it's even derivative of this ride, it just plays into the whole, everything recycles itself. So, I guess I'll wrap this up because I don't want to keep you too long. But do you have any projects outside of Once that you'd like to plug?
I think that's the main one. I have some other ones that I still haven't signed on the dotted line, so I can't really talk about them until they're official, or I maybe even not do it. So we'll see what happens. But for the next thing for me, that later this month I'll be in Indianapolis in November doing a Starbase Indy, a little Star Trek show.
Cool.
That'll be cool. So I'll be still doing some of this con world before the end of the year. And then, maybe I'll do some more Once Upon a Time, and then potentially, pick up a movie or two, if the timing's right. When I'm shooting in season, I don't really know exactly when I'm going to be on Once. I don't have that much lead time, so it's kind of hard to take another project.
Oh, fair enough.
To know if I have enough time even to squeeze it in. So it's the time you're thankful for what you have, and then you kind of good time to work on writing, good time to work on my art or some of my own kind of
Yeah, you mentioned yesterday at dinner that you do abstract painting.
Yeah, I love to paint.
Yeah. Is there a place that anybody could go to see that stuff, or you?
I'm still you know what? There will be, there will be one day. I'm still kind of exploring that world, and I'm doing it mostly now for the feelings that evokes in me, as opposed to the results for everybody else. But people dig it, and they want them. Oh, people like it.
That's awesome.
Apparently, I got at least a good eye, if not any talent. That's why I stick to abstract. It's freeing.
That's perfect.
But I have a lot of respect for the visual art. It was something that I'd always told myself I couldn't do. So it's as much about taking on things that I convinced myself I couldn't do. Yeah, that's what makes it special. For
sure. I 100% see where you're coming from. And my last question, will we get to see the modern Laurel and Hardy again in a pirate adventure? Is Pintel coming back?
He's not coming back anytime soon that I know of. It would be a shame if we don't get to see him again. But if we don't, then, know that I gave it my all. I've always wanted to do more. And I love playing that character, and that's the real reason. So, you never know in Hollywood. I think there definitely should be a sixth Pirates to round it out. Maybe we sneak into that. It would be such an honor.
Yeah, it would be great. And I guess we'll have to wait for the remake of Dungeons & Dragons.
You and I, man. Well, they do another one or two.
They did some sequels.
Yeah, they did some.
Yeah, and the only repeat character...
I don't know that Elwood would be ever returning, but I wish he would.
Yeah.
Even though I don't know if I look forward to that beard or the fact that I lost all this weight and they still put a fat suit on me.
All right, we're back talking some more convention talk here at Invasion of the Remake. This is our second Conditions for Your Surrender episodes. So that's our interview episodes of whatever the fuck we want to do.
Mm-hmm. Because as I said, we're privileged to have access to movie stars and comic creators and get to talk with them.
Yeah, and so I wanted to talk about our worst fanboy experiences at a convention, because we've done the interviews and stuff, and every now and again it's a little tough to keep your cool. And thankfully for me anyway, I wasn't doing an interview when I had my extreme fanboy experience. But so yeah, actually I'll talk about mine first, because my celebrities are comic book guys. I'm actually very calm in front of actors and directors. I dig that stuff. I mean, I'm a filmmaker myself, so I almost see them as just other people I work with from time to time. So it's just talking to a work buddy. And in a way, the comic book stuff is kind of the same thing. I identify with these people well, but I was always a comic book fan. Probably even before I started learning actors' names, I started learning artist names. Mm-hmm. And for me...
What was the first one? Do you remember?
The first...
first artist, you were like, this artist is incredible and I need to know who this person is.
Well, this is this person. That was George Perez.
Oh, George Perez.
He was easily my favorite all-time artist, and he had attended a Calgary Expo, and it happened to be one I wasn't working or doing... I think I was supposed to do interviews at that show. It just never happened.
It goes like that sometimes.
Yeah, and I stood in line for about an hour and a half. And I have a certain etiquette that I'd like to observe when I'm at a convention. You get something signed. I try not to bring more than 3 things up, because other people want to get stuff signed too, right?
Totally. I definitely agree not to monopolize. Yeah. I have some good stories about people monopolizing time.
Trust me. So do I. And, don't be that douchebag.
It's a dick move.
Yeah, get 3 or 4 things signed max. If you want some more stuff, get your ass back in line. Mm-hmm. Don't bring your entire collection to get signed. And
other people paid to be there too, guys.
Yeah, it's not all about you. So... Unfortunately, this is one of those guests, and he will sign everything you have. And I stood in line for him almost as long as Stan Lee. I was in line for a good hour and a half. I had some hardcovers and stuff. I didn't bring everything. I just kind of brought some keys. But I had actually planned to go to his line a couple of times over that weekend, but it was so long.
Oh, my God. I could actually never... I was working... I had an artist table that year, and I could see him, and that line never ended.
Oh, yeah.
And then it merged. Remember, it merged with the Coco Brooks line, and there's all this confusion.
Yeah, I wasn't in it at that point, but my gosh, yeah. I'm like, I can't wait to see George Perez. Oh, I thought I was getting pizza. I could totally see that. So, yeah, I'm standing in line, and I'm realizing people are getting everything they want signed. They're getting photos. They're getting sketches. I'm like, you know what? I've been here forever. Fuck it. Mm-hmm. So I got everything that I had signed, because I wasn't getting that back in that line. Got my photo. I got a sketch. It is hanging on my wall of the Hulk.
Yep, it is very good. I'm looking right at it.
And yeah, I totally nerded out. It was embarrassing for everyone.
Oh my God, I love you so much. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't that bad, but yeah, you're my number one favorite artist, and it's amazing. I'm so happy to have you here. And if I could have brought my entire collection, I would have. But I'm also not that guy. So, But even then, I realized I'm like, okay, I think I got about 6 things signed, and then they had to wait for him to do the sketch, and then they had to wait. I was about to take off, and my girlfriend at the time was like, oh, do you want a photo? So I raced back, got the photo. I'm like, I could just see steam coming out of people's ears. And I'm like, fuck it, that's what you guys did to me for an hour and a half. And I enjoyed it. He was a wonderful human being, and hopefully I'll get another chance to meet him again in calmer state.
Blaine George Perez.
Yes, Blaine is the gentleman who does a lot of the comic book guests at the Calgary Expo. He's a good friend of mine, and maybe we'll have him on as a guest at some point.
No, we totally should, actually.
Yeah, he knows his stuff, especially when you get into the really older comics and things like that. He's a good conversation, and if you actually want to listen to him, Blaine, I did an episode of Between the Pages with Blaine, and actually I don't think I was there. I think Richard did that one and talked original art and stuff like that. So
yeah, we'll plug Blaine. Actually, his company is called Original Pages, and they can be found on Facebook, and you can buy original comic book pages. I know you've bought a ton.
I've bought quite a few off of Blaine. He's emptied my wallet.
I most recently bought page 1 of issue 19 of Elvira's comic book series from him at the Red and White Expo. And it was the only thing I bought. I was like exploding from the eyes.
He showed me that page, and I'm not a big Elvira fan or a Sutton,
yeah, me neither,
or a Sutton fan. So, but I thought of two people when he showed me that page, and you were one of them. So I'm glad it went to you.
Yeah, and like what a steal! Like,
yeah,
sold it to me for nothing. It always boggles my mind when you go and you see a finished comic book page, and having drawn comics very non-professionally, and being a bit of an artist and illustrator myself, like I know the work that goes in. I have a great artist friend. At the expo, he goes by Grant Moon, and he would be like if Frank Frazetta and Bernie Wrightson had a love child. And
nice.
His style is incredible. And he had done this Warlord pinup. Well, Mike Grell's Warlord, of course.
I have a Mike Grell on my wall.
So he did this thing, and Grant is extremely meticulous and detail-oriented and a bit of a perfectionist. I'm going to say this, Grant, if you're listening, to a fault. And the pinup actually was supposed to be submitted to DC because Grant is old enough to have gone to college, at the time when John Byrne was there, and he knows a lot of these guys. Went to school with some of the guys that went on to do art for a then brand new trading card game you might have heard of called Magic the Gathering. And Grant actually was sent the job offer to work for who had that card series first, Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah.
He had the offer to work, but through a series of unfortunate events, he never got the information and never got hired on or whatever. But so he did this Warlord page. It was supposed to be submitted to DC. He takes too fucking long to draw stuff, Grant. And but he put 8 or 9 or 10 hours.
Which would be really normal now.
Yeah, he put 8 or 9 hours into this piece.
Right.
And it was Mike Grell would have given him a nod. It was incredible. Yeah. And he sold the original for $200.
Oh,
for 8 hours of work, and I was just oh my god, man! It's so you should be selling artist quality prints of this for $200. Mm-hmm. It boggled my mind.
That's a really good deal, especially if it's a 11 by 17 standard.
Oh yeah, 11 by 17, yeah,
gorgeous.
For sure.
That's amazing. Actually, I got my Mike Grell Warlord piece. God, I got that over 20 years ago now, but they only paid $50 for it at the time. But it's a convention sketch.
It's a full body.
It's a full
though.
body too.
Yeah, that's crazy. I only ever purchased or got one commission. This is not really a fanboy story, but we had a good time. I was set up with my company at Figures at the time, and back when I had at Figures, we had an end cap, so we had the biggest booth you could get at the Calgary Expo before they let bullshit like the tower t-shirts and these giant islands, right? That stuff didn't exist when I was doing the show, and this was the year that I think Spock was there.
Leonard Nimoy. That was probably the first year that show really exploded into what it is now.
Yeah, and I remember the line for Spock, and I was just this is unreal. And I had never been to a big show before. I didn't go to San Diego until 2009, so this was probably, what did he come, 2006 or something like that, maybe 7.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, so Darwin Cook.
Oh yeah,
one of my all-time favorite artists, worked with Bruce Timm, has that same style as Bruce Timm, but where Bruce Timm it leans more on the cartoon side, Darwin Cook's style leads more to the pulp 40s, the Eisner type of stuff, right? Yeah. So he had revitalized the Spirit, which was, I don't know if it's the first like comic book format sequential thing, but it was made by someone who defined the art of the comic book.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been the first, but he was certainly one.
Yeah, probably like Little Nemo and stuff.
I think I would say Will Eisner is the man who really defined it.
Yeah, he made sequential storytelling, sequential visual storytelling and art.
Yeah, yeah.
His splash pages are unparalleled in the spirit. Just look up Will Eisner the Spirit, guys. Like you have Google, Jesus.
Yeah, and
but
don't
blow your mind.
watch the Frank Miller movie.
Oh,
It
God.
is nothing to do with the Spirit. It is Frank Miller just doing Sin City with Will Eisner's
It was
characters.
terrible. They showed the octopus right away. What the actual shit? And where was Ebony?
Yeah.
The greatest racially stereotyped character in the whole history of comic books is the Spirit sidekick. And you know what? Darwin gave him a modern reimagining, but he kept him in.
Yeah.
And I respected him for that, to not bow to PC censorship bullshit and leave out such an integral character. And there's some really, like, this shit that Eisner drew with him back in the 40s wouldn't fly today.
Oh, well.
But again, whenever this stuff comes up, it's a product of its time, guys.
It is, yeah.
And you can't pretend that stuff didn't happen. But anyway, I could talk forever about how I feel about racial stereotypes in media. But so Darwin Cook, and I had read a comic book while I briefly worked for Red Skull Comics in town here, called The New Frontier, DC's The New Frontier, and it just blew my mind. It was so good. 12-issue series. I read it in 2 softcover trades because I missed the books.
Yeah.
Incredible artwork. It was basically, the Civil War storyline, but set in the 40s and done right, not a giant disjointed, tentacled mess like
and touched
Civil War.
on a lot of the DC Comics history. I mean, it's
Huge
revisionist history because it's a self-contained world in this one.
Yeah, it's like an
using the
Elseworlds
DC.
title almost.
Yeah, absolutely. But my God, it was great. I did get my copy signed at that show when he was here as well because I'm a huge Darwin Cook fan as well.
Well, I did,
but I kept my shit together on that one.
I did with him. I bought through my store, like I had a Diamond account, so I ordered the Absolute Edition. Giant, crazy hardcover. They're super expensive. Not if you have a wholesale account, guys. And so I bought one for myself because my trades were all ratty, and I'd read it over and over because it's so good. I would say, I'll go on record and say that it's the greatest self-contained story since Kingdom Come.
I would agree with you. Like, when I think of the top 10 comic books produced by DC Comics, it is right up there.
For sure.
It's hugging Kingdom Come for sure.
Yeah, I would put Kingdom Come definitely in the top spot, and then right below New Frontier.
Yeah.
Incredible book, incredible artist, a super nice, down-to-earth guy. His wife was there; she was super nice. We would ferry them water because we were right across the way from them. But so I brought my Absolute to get signed or whatever, and he drew a spirit in it for me, which I thought was pretty funny.
Awesome.
He was taking commissions that year. Which I think you know that.
I think I was working that show, so when I'm usually working a show, I try not to ask for commissions, which broke my heart because I'm like, come on, bring them back because I really need a Darwin Cook on my wall.
Yeah, and I was like, I always bring a whole bunch of money to these shows. Anybody who does the Calgary Expo knows you need a whole lot of money to attend and buy crap. So I had money with me, and I really wanted a drawing of the spirit because I love the Eisner spirit. I really love Darwin Cook's revision of it. And then when he got off the book, it kind of dropped off for me, so I stopped reading. But I really wanted a spirit. And my wife will back this up 100%. I am too nice. I will always hold back and stand back and stay aside and let people monopolize their time. I'm too nice. Mm-hmm. And I was doing this again. I was like, I'll wait. I don't want to get in the way of the attendees because I'm a vendor and my job is to make money and whatever. But I really fucking love Darwin Cook. So I'm standing there, and his wife, he wasn't in yet. It was in the morning. And there was all these vendors. Comic Book Dave from Red Deer and a couple other guys. And they're all standing in line, and I go up to the front, and I'm like, I'd like a commission of the spirit. And she's like, okay, it'll be $350. I'm like, done. For an original piece of work? No question. Like I said, $200 for a splash page is friggin' highway robbery to sell it like that, right? So $350, here you go. Lucky for me, that price point eliminated some commissions, right? So, the vendors who probably want to flip it, they're not going to pay that kind of money, but I'm, a super fan. I paid my money. And then right after I give her my money, she goes, 1 spot left. He only did 6 that weekend.
Yeah.
And I got one of them. And like the second to last one.
Yeah.
And he gave it to me. And at that time, like he was doing the commissions in the evening, which I think every artist should have a limit and do them in the evening if they're a big name like that, to save things like George Perez. And I have another story about this too, with another artist that I admire. And so Darwin, we got to know each other and stuff a bit and chat about things. And I remember standing with him talking about the Spirit, and this kid came by and he was wearing the Frank Miller Spirit outfit, right? The black suit with the red tie bullshit. And Darwin stops, dead conversation, looks up at the kid and goes, "Wrong costume, jackass." So I didn't super fanboy over him, but he gave me my Spirit drawing on the Sunday, right? And he colored it.
Nice.
And I was like, "Oh my God, it's in color." And he said, "Well, they're kind of expensive." And I was like, "Dude, no, you're not expensive." And it hangs prominently in my office, and it never gets taken down.
And when you spend that kind of price point, they put in that kind of time. That was a lesson I learned, because I try to keep my budget in that $100 range, and I spent the most I had on an artist last year, and my God, I got an amazing piece. It was an in-jack piece that's hanging over your head right now, and when I got it back, I'm like, worth every penny.
Totally.
And even then, it was $180, I think, but he put $180 of effort into it, and it was a much smaller piece. Like it's one of those blank covers, so it's comic book size.
Yeah, mine actually was 13 by 19.
Yeah, so if this had been an 11 by 17 that he had done, that piece would have been a $350 piece for sure.
If it was bigger.
If it was bigger. So, I was completely happy with what I got. And, sometimes, I might want quantity and come back. Because I'll come back with 10 sketches out of this show. So I'm like, okay, my $1,000 is just about gone. And so somebody like Darwin Cook would blow through half my budget right away.
Totally, but it would be worth it.
For sure.
It is. Like, I look at that piece every day. It's incredible. I love it. And I'd love for him to come back just because he's a super nice guy. And that's the thing I like with meeting the artists, is that everybody is really nice. For the most part. I've met a couple guys who are real high on themselves. And then, surprise, their professional career is gone shortly thereafter.
Well, that actually, the guys that I've met that haven't impressed me, their careers are still just fine. And... for the most part, don't be an asshole to your fans.
Don't be an asshole to your publishers either. That's the guy I'm thinking of. Said some nasty words about someone, and he was out.
Yeah, and it will bite you in the butt. But at the same time, I've learned in those rare cases, I can separate the person from the work. Like, I can still appreciate it. And I'm not going to name names, but...
No, I wouldn't either.
And... no, I want to, but I'm not going to.
Don't do it.
I'm not going to do it.
I'll ask you when we're done recording if it's the same guy. It probably is. But I was thinking of people monopolizing time. So I love David Finch. He was a Wildstorm artist. He came on board to probably my number 3 favorite superhero of all time, which is Moon Knight. Anybody who's like, "Oh, it's just Marvel's Batman," well, you can go fuck yourself. It's a great character, and his vision of that character was just perfect. Like,
he drew it really well.
He did, yeah. And I can't remember the writer, but everything in that book was just perfect. And he was the artist throughout the run. It was a short run because it's Moon Knight, and it's always a short run. And I brought my Moon Knight #1, and I was like, I just want to shake his hand and say, thanks for breathing life into this character that I love, that we hadn't seen since the 90s, right? The Mark Spector book or whatever.
Yeah, actually, that was the first
been the last one.
revival. Yeah,
totally, and that was 2007.
I want to say that was Greg Horowitz, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I can't remember
who wrote it.
So I'm standing in line, and my friend is standing in line with me. 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, 90 minutes. Because 2 guys got a commission of Psylocke. Awesome.
And they stood and waited.
They stood there, and he drew it and talked to them for an hour and a half while there was a line, a huge line. And eventually the handler got up and goes, okay, who here just wants an autograph? And, we formed a line, and it was a production line. I didn't even get to say anything to David Finch.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I remember trying to pony up and to get in that line, and it was constantly capped, and then I finally got in the line and managed to meet him and talk to him, and really nice guy, and maybe in some cases a little too nice, because something
this is
like
the
that
case,
happens, right?
He's too nice, he's too involved with the fans. I bet that piece was beautiful.
Oh, for sure.
But
yeah, and nicest guy on the planet. It turned out he has relatives here in town who own a restaurant about 4 blocks away from my comic shop.
Oh, nice.
So he wants to come every year, and I'm like, well, next year, now that you know, walk 4 blocks down and come into the shop.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, really nice guy.
Yeah, super nice guy. Now I'm trying to think of like a moment at a show, and I have met and worked with some incredible people. And I've never had an in-convention fanboy freak out. But working with the Calgary HorrorCon last year, or I guess it would have been this year, they did a Reanimator reunion. Mm-hmm. So Stuart Gordon and Barbara Crampton and Bruce Abbott and, oh my God, Barbara Gordon and Jeffrey Coombs.
Oh, I wish I would have gone to that one, because Jeffrey Combs is right up there for me. He's
totally.
amazing.
I mean, I love Reanimator. He's great. He's great in everything.
Yeah.
And Frighteners. Probably his best role ever is in Frighteners. And so we're at this this pre-convention party, and I think I was representing an event. I was doing the 48-hour horror film challenge, the Terror Challenge, with some friends who organized that event. So the organizer of HorrorCon, Dan, had let me pop up last minute and promote my event. And I ended up working with the guests because, like I said, I can't help it. I want guests to love Calgary because I want them to come back. And the thing with actors is everybody knows everybody. So if you treat them like rock stars and they go back to LA and go, we did this show in this backwoods little redneck town called Calgary in Canada, but it was awesome. They're going to tell all their friends, right? Mm-hmm. So we're at this party, and Jeffrey Coombs is there, and I made brief eye contact with him and got a panic attack. And then he was playing pool with my friends, and I couldn't go over and talk to him.
Right.
I couldn't do it the whole night, and I was like, "What the fuck?" I've talked to John Carpenter. I worked with Jason Mewes. I courted Linnea Quigley, who's in 160 horror movies. I've done all this work with all these celebrities, and that one guy, I was I just couldn't talk to him at all. And then not midday through Saturday, because everyone's making fun of me for fanboying all over it. I think it was the organizer brought me over and introduced me, and then it was fine. And then we went out for dinner Saturday, whatever, with them and stuff, and it was cool. But yeah, that was the one and only time. And I say, I've met some incredible people. Bruce Campbell, nobody, but
yeah,
Jeffrey
Bruce
Coombs
is really cool.
Bruce was a riot. I have heard from people that he's a dick at conventions, and I will tell you they are all wrong.
Yeah, I've heard the same rumors, but
he was awesome.
My brief interaction with Bruce Campbell was an amazing one. His panel was amazing, and yeah, I wish I would have been able to interview him or whatever, but
untouchable, I think, at shows like that.
Yeah, But he is there. He puts on a show for everybody when he does his panels. He kind of gets into the Bruce Campbell character rather than I don't really know how he is per se, but man, if you get that photo op, they usher you through those lines like cattle. But he gives you that 12, 20, 30 seconds, and he makes them count when you're there. Mm-hmm. Robert Englund was the same way. He was so cool.
I find most often with horror movie actors that they're a lot more connected to their fans.
They really do appreciate their fans. Yeah.
The people, I have to say this because hopefully they'll listen to this episode. But Jason Mewes and Lee Arenberg, sorry Lee, and even Billy West, but especially Lee and Jason, I've never seen a celebrity treat their fans as good as those two guys. And I would consider Jay to be a pretty big celebrity. I mean, he's well known in pop culture, and he will take the time for you all the time. We're in the airport, and the barista at Starbucks recognizes him. And he took photos and signed his wallet, and like, it was no big deal, right? And even at the convention, he would, out smoking, whatever, he would engage with everybody, he'd snap a picture at someone's booth. He wandered over to Kapow Comics, which is a large comic book shop in Lethbridge that sponsored Phil Lamar to be there. He wandered over and just started signing stuff, like, randomly off the shelf, and, he really put the effort. And Lee, too, like, he told everybody that his work is invalid or non-existent without them, right? Because if the audience isn't there and they don't love it, then his work is meaningless because it doesn't get seen. So that like his whole craft is due to the fans, and he let everyone know that. It was super cool. So you hear stories of guys that are full of themselves, but there are those guys that really do appreciate meeting the fans and telling them that they're the reason that they're doing what they're doing, right?
Yeah. I love the celebrities that will wander the floor at these shows, too. I was working I had our shop there, Words and Pictures, and I was still setting up. They hadn't let the fans in yet. The gates hadn't flowed yet. So this dude walks in, and I start talking to him. He's like, "Oh, I'm set up on the other side." I asked him where he was, and we had this great little conversation, and then he wanders off again, and then I'm like, he seemed awfully familiar. Like, I didn't know who I was talking to. And it was Aaron Douglas from Battlestar Galactica, which just made me slap myself in the head, because I think that week, like, I had gone through a really bad breakup prior to that show, and I just shotgunned the entire series of Battlestar Galactica, that new show. So you think I would have recognized him when that guy was standing in front of me, but I didn't. And it was just two dudes talking, and that was just cool. And that's really who these people are. They're just another person doing a job, and they're just in a fortunate position to experience the appreciation we have for that and give some of that back.
Totally. Speaking of Aaron Douglas, I think it was the first year of the Lethbridge Entertainment Expo. I was trying to have an unsuccessful artist table and running the panels for Matt at that show, and Aaron Douglas was a guest at that show. And yeah, what a super, like, I haven't seen that show, no idea who he was. And like, he just came over to me because we have the same t-shirt, and we talked about music, and he's a big music record collector and stuff. And so am I. So we nerded out about that. And then it was like, I had to get him for his panel. I didn't know who he was. And I grabbed Matt. I'm like, okay, who's Aaron Douglas? And it was this guy who we just shot the shit. Right. My favorite shooting the shit moment ever, a show in Edmonton. I can't remember what it was. I want to say it was one of the pop culture fairs, but it might have been a different show. It actually could have been the show that became the Edmonton Expo, the one that Shane Tergeron had put on before. Right. The Edmonton Toy and
I think that
comic
is the
fair
one.
Or something. Sorry, Shane, I can't remember what it's called. But I like wandered up, just standing in the hallway, and this guy came up to me. Older Asian guy, didn't recognize him, no badging, no nothing, just a guy standing there. I assumed he was like an attendee, right? And we chatted about the weather in Edmonton and blah blah blah, and like just really really crazy small talk for 5 or 10 minutes. And he's like, "Oh, I gotta go." I'm like, "Okay." So he wanders off, right? So I go to see a buddy in the artist alley, and there's this guy, and at his table is a name tag that says Larry Hama. Who did revitalize G.I. Joe. And I was like, holy shit, I had no idea.
Yeah.
He was even at the show. Because usually as a vendor, you're nailed to your booth. You can't get away.
For sure.
We had a lull or whatever, and I just totally talked about the weather with the guy who revitalized G.I. Joe. It was so crazy. And I wish I had a copy of G.I. Joe to get a signature or something, but I never did.
And yeah, for anybody who knows or doesn't know, like what you saw, that the animated series, that was all based on his work.
Totally.
Like the Hasbro with Transformers and G.I. Joe specifically, they were producing these characters, but they didn't know what they were going to be. And it was Marvel Comics and their writers that really defined who these characters were. So that Optimus Prime you see on screen, that was defined by Marvel. I mean, it's still Hasbro's at the end of the day, but everything you know about that came from the Marvel artists and writers.
Yeah, especially with that original G.I. Joe series from the 80s, like Larry Hama's series. And I wish I could remember the artist on that? I want to say Len Wein. Is that right?
No, he was a writer. Oh, I just had it in my head too. There's been a few.
That one iconic, that first issue, that red cover with the Jeep coming over, that very first issue.
Yeah,
is just
I think Mike Zeck was doing the covers for those books. And I'll be damned if I can remember who the artist was, even though he's been at Expo many times.
Yeah, just check Comic Vine, guys. It'll tell you.
Yeah.
I can't remember. But that was kind of cool, like, shoot the shit moment. My brother had a great one. One year we were set up, and it was the Star Trek reunion year at the Calgary Expo, which was like their pinnacle, I think.
Yeah, that was their Next Generation. They brought the entire main cast of Star Trek Next Generation.
Even Will.
Yeah, Will Wheaton, everybody.
Yeah, it was awesome. So
it was the first time they'd ever done that at a convention.
Yeah, it was the first one in like 25 years or some crazy thing. Yeah. They were all together. It was really cool. They did this event in the, remember in the corral where they did the big talk, and it was awesome, and we got to go. But so the morning, like the Saturday morning or the Sunday morning of that show, Sunday morning I think it was, my brother was helping me at my Figures booth, again, big end cap. But next to us was Troma Studios, and Lloyd Kaufman was there.
Yeah, that wasn't. I wasn't too far away from that.
Yeah, because you guys had the cage that year, right?
Yeah, I had the cage that year, and I think the Sunday, like, he was doing teardown at his booth, and I wandered over and finally talked to him because it was killing me not to talk to him.
Well, we talked to him all weekend. Yeah. I had met him either the same year or the year prior at San Diego, and he remembers everybody, which is crazy. So he remembered me. We talked all weekend, and he signed some stuff for me, whatever, right? And we shot the shit about Troma and, like, gonzo filmmaking and having no money and tacos and whatever else he's into, right? So, of course, first thing in the morning, Lloyd's setting up. I come over. I help him set his merch out, what little was left, because he burns through stuff so fast. And I look over at my brother at my booth to make sure he's okay. And, because, of course, we were there way early and everything's ready. And there's just some white-haired dude. He's buying some stuff. I'm like, Chris has this. No problem, right? And, whatever, talking to Lloyd. And then Chris wanders over and he's all, like, big-eyed. I'm like, what? What happened, right? What's wrong? And he's like, you saw the guy that was at the booth, right? I'm like, oh, yeah. He's like, dude, that was Data. Mm. So Data went to my store, my It Figures booth, and he bought a Superman flag and Star Wars merchandise for his kid.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and
I saw him wandering around. So.
Chris is a big fan and loves Data, and Brent Spiner had offered, like, oh, you want to take a picture? Do you want an autograph? And, like, Chris is, like, extremely professional. It shows, like, no, that's okay, and whatever, right? So he refused it, and whatever. It was just super cool. Like, you do get those run-ins sometimes.
Yeah.
The absolute best celebrity run-in at a convention ever was the Spock year. It was a good year. Spock year. So, Leonard Nimoy is literally lined up outside the building. So, right around the corner from my booth is the Honky Tonk Man. Right? My brother and I, big fans of wrestling in the 80s. Loved all those guys. Back when there were characters, there were good guys and bad guys. It was like a comic book.
Yeah, I miss the days when kayfabe was still a thing, and now there's no real secrets in wrestling anymore. But
no,
I miss those bigger than life characters. Undertaker's probably the last man standing from that era.
Yeah, and he was actually I always loved that character.
Yeah.
So we're doing our thing. It's Saturday. It's like midway through the day, lineup's insane for Leonard Nimoy. And then from what I heard, I never went to meet him, but what I heard is that he was sick, so it was like an assembly line, right? Just getting people through because he wasn't feeling well. And he's like, it was 85 at the time, so, like, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
Up walks the Honky Tonk Man. Now, if anybody knows who the Honky Tonk Man is from wrestling, if you Google him, he looks exactly the same. He looks like the Honky Tonk Man. He was wearing an Elvis jumpsuit.
Was he really?
When he walked up to the table, Chris and I immediately, holy shit, it's the Honky Tonk Man. And he just walks up and he goes, "Goddamn Leonard Nimoy charging $75 for an autograph. That is ridiculous. WWF was the #1 television program for 30 years, and I'm only charging $20." and then went to his booth. Was fucking brilliant.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and he talks exactly like that. And so later when we had a lull, Chris and I went over and we talked to him and his wife and like got a photo and stuff, and it was awesome. And yeah, it's super cool. That was my favorite celebrity moment ever, was the honky tonk man bitching about how much Spock was charging for an autograph.
That's great. Well, you guys have waited long enough. Maybe we should run that Jason Mewes interview. So he's gonna geek out about some comic book stuff. So that's kind of
I asked Jason Mewes, and you'll hear in the interview what was his favorite remake, and he is just such a huge comic book fan that he just talks about comic book movies, which is awesome. And then we get into some other stuff as well, and a super secret reveal.
What could it be, Calgary Expo? We'll find out shortly.
Motherfuck, noise. 1, 2, 3, 4, noise, smoking weed, doing coke, drinking beers, rolling fatties, smoking blunts, who smokes the blunts, we smoke the blunts, rolling blunts and smoking blunts.
Let me get a nickel bag.
$15, little man. Put that shit in my hand. If that money doesn't show, then you owe me, oh. My jungle love, yeah. Oh, we oh. I think I wanna know ya. Yeah, what?
What the hell are you singing?
You don't know Jungle Love? That shit is the Mad Notes. Written by God herself and handed down to the greatest band in the world. The motherfucking Time.
I mean, the guys in that Prince movie?
Yeah, Purple Rain.
That shit was so gay. Fucking 80s style. Hey!
All right, I'm sitting with the infamously famous Jason Mewes. Jason, can you think of a movie remake that you loved?
Oh, a remake that I loved. I mean, I guess they... I don't want to say I guess they remade... We're just talking about stuff like Fantastic Four, where they remade it. Spider-Man, where they remake it, and they remake it over with different characters and such, yes?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
All right, I don't know. I definitely enjoyed the different... Because, again, I'm a big into comic books, so the two pop in my head is definitely the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man. I definitely don't think any of them were perfect, but I definitely enjoyed, Spider-Man with Tobey, and then I liked the different sort of aspect in the new Spider-Man with the new gentleman, I forget his name. Andrew Garfield, yeah. It was nice how they showed him, like, when he got his powers, he was training with the skateboard and the thing. I don't know, it was definitely nice to see sort of a little different take on that. Also, the Fantastic Four, of course, they made an old version, which was horrible when CGI wasn't very popular.
Yeah, Roger Corman.
Yeah.
The king of C movies.
Oh, it was so bad, but to me it was still good because it was so cool to see the comic book movie on in live action. To see that alone was awesome.
Yeah, I felt in that movie specifically that they fucking nailed Doctor Doom.
Yeah,
like, he looked like Doctor Doom, and all the reimagining since they missed the boat on that. I don't like. Do you find it weird how they take a character that's so established and try to tweak it? Do you think that's unusual? Do you think they should stay true, or is it cool that they do their own spin?
I don't know why they do that. I think their own spin. I guess if it works with the story, no. I think they should leave it alone. So, I mean, again, I guess it could work for maybe here and there, but look at that right to the end.
All right, so. Talking about reimagining.
Yes, there's a picture of Apocalypse, and it's a bummer because the picture that they showed, it doesn't look... It just looks bad, and it stinks because, yes, I feel like they could definitely make that better. I don't think they're reimagining it and trying to do their own. I don't know if they just didn't put a lot of work into it or what. But, yeah, I don't know. I think for the most part, like you said, if they're trying to do their own thing, it doesn't necessarily work most of the time. But again, I feel like for me, when it has to do with comic book movies, to me it doesn't matter. It is definitely, even the newest version of the Fantastic Four, Doom was definitely a reimagining and different and all that. But again, just the whole way they went about it, it still was entertaining to me, and I enjoyed it. But, you know, I definitely think I wish I could think of some other movies that aren't comic related, and then maybe I could comment more on them. But, you know what? With movies, for me, it's like most time I'm entertained one way or another. The storyline or the plot could be horrible, but the acting and the CGI or the special effects was cool. The monsters were cool, what have you, and it was entertaining to me.
Yeah, so you can take a movie that is being remade, and you don't hate on it right away. You take it as entertainment, and then if there's some validity to it, you kind of see that as you're watching it. You don't go in with preconceived notions.
Yes, fair enough. Totally. So it's a good way to put it, for sure. So it's tough for me when it comes to movies. People ask me, there's not many movies that I've watched and I'm like, oh my god, it was horrible, because even if it's that bad and I'm not entertained and I'm not enjoying it, I usually turn it off, so I can't even talk bad about it because I haven't sat through to watch it, really.
Just give it up, yeah. There's so much to do, and I mean, you're a busy guy, you're always working, and now you're on the con circuit and stuff like that. So let's talk about work a little bit. I consider all of yours and Kevin's movies kind of like sacred cows, so they could never be remade, but we are getting a few sequels now, years later, like with Clerks 2.
Yes.
Which, the thing I really loved about Clerks, especially when I saw it in the 90s, is that you identified with Dante as being this kind of like guy who's got a future, he doesn't know where he's going, no direction, and it ends in such a way that you think, okay, maybe he's going to go back to college and he's going to get his life on track, and that's where you are at that time in your life as a teenager. You're like, oh yeah, I could see that bright future, it's going to come, and unless you count Kevin's other ending where he gets shot, and I hate that ending.
Yeah.
But and then in Clerks 2, it was brilliant because he's stuck in this dead-end job and another girlfriend, and nothing's changed. And I feel like as an audience member loving that movie in the 90s, and you catch up with Dante again, nothing's changed, and maybe you identify with that because like nothing's changed for you, right? So I've heard a rumor that they're making a new Mallrats.
Yeah, there is going to be a new Mallrats, and it's a bummer because there actually was going to be Clerks 3. There is a script. Eventually, hopefully, we get to make it, but it does continue on with that, like you're saying, like where he's at this point, Dante and his life and all that. And same with Randall. But we'll see what happens with that. I'm not sure when it'll happen, if it's gonna. It depends. But Mallrats 2, yes, the same thing. It sort of shows where, Jason Lee and Jeremy London's characters and some of the other characters, where they're at now and all that, and their kids and the mall, and it's really awesome script, and there's a lot more to it than that, of course, but hopefully all goes as planned and we start shooting that in January, beginning of February, so we'll see.
And we're going to, of course, see you and Kevin return as Jay and Silent Bob?
Totally. Jay and Bob will definitely be in it, and they're not in a big part of the movie, but they come in and do some, when they do come in, they are important part of the script.
That's awesome. Well, I'm super stoked. I first found Mallrats in the video rental days. And on this podcast, every movie, I rented it on VHS. Well, same with Mallrats. And then I went back to Clerks, and then, of course, continued on as movies came out. So Mallrats is very close to my heart, and I'm really looking forward to that movie. So I had a question about Clerks, and I don't know if you remember that far back, but I felt that your performance in Clerks was very organic, where everybody definitely was trying to act. And I had this question, and I don't know if you can answer this question, but I feel that because you and Kevin have been friends for so long and you know each other, when you guys created these characters, was there a script for you in that movie? Like, were your lines scripted, or was he just like, Jason, just be you for 5 minutes and we'll roll the camera and use that? Like,
no, there was definitely a script. But again, and Kevin tells the story best, is that the script, there was totally a script, but he remembers me coming up to him and saying, oh, dude, I don't know if I could do this. And he's like, what are you talking about? Everything I wrote is you and how you say it and things you've said. So even though it was written, it was stuff that I had said over the past 3-4 years of our friendship. Like, we'd go to that. He worked at the convenience store, and I'd come help him out on Sundays with the Sunday paper, as it was called the Asbury Park Press. Anyway, and when we'd get there, I'd be like, oh, F anything that moves, and whatever. I'd pull my balls out, and I would be like, I'd pretend to mosh and say snooch and all the goofy things I did in the movie. A lot of it I've said or done, and the way Jay acted is exactly how I was as a 14 to 19-year-old kid. But I told him I couldn't do it because I wasn't an actor, and when I read it on paper and tried to perform it for the camera, it just didn't seem right, even though, because whenever I acted that way, it was for my own entertainment, it wasn't for other people. And so when it was time to be like, hey, do this now, say that and be funny and dance and do that, it was weird, and I just made me really uncomfortable, and I used to have to drink and all that, and I've told that a bunch on my podcast and on my Q&As, and same with Kevin, he's told his perspective on it. So it was very much me, but again, it was written, there was a script. So.
And do you find doing things like Clerks 2 and now with Mallrats coming up, like revisiting that character? Because in all the movies I find that like Jay and Silent Bob are the most static as far as growth. They are the same characters in every movie. Do you find it strange to now go and play a character based on how you were as a teenager? Do you find it like weird, or do you ever feel like you throw in the Jay-isms, the snooch, the nooch, and all? Do you find that like, what was I thinking, or is it like a fun kind of like look back, or?
No, because I feel like it's easy for me to go back and play it because again I know it and it's me. But I feel like Kevin's done very well in adapting Jay to more of how I've grown up and grown to the character, like being sober, or this happening or that, less snooches and maybe just snooches and stuff. Because I do say that in real life, just not as much as I used to. And there's definitely some things that he writes as the teenage Jay that yes, now like I'll be like, really, you want me to do that? Like, and I'll be a little more embarrassed to be doing it in front of 20, 30, 40 people that are working on the movie, where I wouldn't be during Mallrats, because I was like, oh, that's stuff I do all the time. But now I'm like, well, I don't really feel as comfortable doing that like I did then. But again, it's easy to do, but there are things that I feel like I'm not really like that as much now, so it takes a little more of me trying to go back to that. But a lot of it is me still, because Kevin's adapted it to that, so again, it's still pretty easy. Yeah,
you guys definitely have a great chemistry together, and I feel like every project you guys do together, you're great together. So it's nice to keep seeing that, especially being such a fan in the early 90s, and now, we're nearly 20 years later, and people in my generation are having kids, and they're going to have all this great work to fall back on. And speaking of having kids, yes. 7 months ago something happened. We want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, 7 months ago we had, my wife and I had a little girl, Logan Lee Mewes. She's almost 7 months. She's like a week away or so from being 7 months old, and it's been awesome. It's something I've wanted with my wife, I've wanted for the last 3-4 years. We've been talking about it. We've been together almost 10 years. It's always something I've thought about, having a family, getting married, having a family, having a kid and all that good stuff. But I've always, of course, there's been detours at me struggling with drugs and falling off and all that, and then not meeting the right girl, and then maybe thinking I met the right girl, but I was drug-induced and all that. But anyway, then I met my wife 10 years ago, and it took some years of us being together. She was younger, and so I would say I've been wanting this with my wife, I would say, for at least the last 4 or 5 years. But she was finally ready, last year. We talked about it, and she got off birth control, and we tried, and thank goodness we were blessed enough, and 4 months off birth control, and she got pregnant. So
yeah, that's great. Yeah, and it's a beautiful baby. The first thing that you showed me when you got off the plane was a picture of your kid and a video, and it was awesome. So congratulations for that.
You.
That's a big step in anybody's life for sure. So I guess the last thing would be, is there anything you're currently working on, or do you want to plug Smodcast or anything like that? Would be great.
Hopefully Mallrats 2, like we just talked about in January. There's Muse Juice. I have this vape juice that I started. It's people know about vaping and e-liquid. It's called Muse Juice. You go to musejuice.com, and it's nicotine liquid. I don't know if you can get it out here in Canada because we're in the States. I don't know that, but anyway, that's something I've been working on. that I'm into. I'm into vaping, but I'm also Jay and Silent Bob Get Old is a podcast we've been doing for the last 5 years. We tour with it all over. You can find out if we'll be close to you. CSMOD, SEESMOD.com is the website where it shows the list of where we're going to be. Or Kevin and I are always tweeting about our new shows, new comic book shows where I'm going to be at. He'll be in Calgary, for example, and I'll be doing some stuff here in Canada. But that's all on csmod.com or our Twitter, Mewes, Jay Mewes. Kevin's Twitter, he talks about where we're going to be. And I've just been trying to direct. I've been doing auditions and meetings for TV. I really want to get on TV. I'm a really big fan of TV and TV shows and stuff, so I really want to do that. I really want to direct. And, just keep an eye out, everybody. I'll be tweeting and Facebooking and all that good stuff, or be on CSMOD for where you'll see me next.
That's great. Thanks, Jason. That's really great.
Cool, brother. Thank you.
Really, really great.
All right, that was Jason Mewes, and did he make an announcement? Well, I guess it's an unofficial announcement. No, if you want to see an official announcement, go to the Calgary Expo website. And we're not even sure he was talking about Calgary Expo specifically, are we?
No, he never said. He just said that he was pretty sure that Kevin was coming to Calgary in the new year, and then confirmed it. But he never specifically said why. But I don't know. You heard it here first on Invasion of the Remake, guys.
We don't like to do clickbait, but we're doing clickbait.
Clickbait. Totally clickbait. I was thinking back while the interview was running that with loving comic books and stuff, I also am a giant comic book fan. That started for me really early with the dailies like Garfield and then into comics eventually. I didn't know that comic book shops existed until I was a couple years later, so I would buy it like the grocery store and convenience store and stuff. But the first book I picked up, because I love the 90s X-Men cartoon, so I picked up X-Men #1, the 90s Jim Lee one, right? Yeah. And I was like, oh my god, this is probably the greatest comic book ever created. Like, the art was like so intense, story was really good, it was all the characters I know from the TV show. So that for me was, like you said, George Perez was your first artist you had to know. For me, it was Jim Lee. Right. And to this day, I love everything that Jim Lee does. Maybe not Bloodshot or whatever that Image comic was.
Oh, Deathblow.
Deathblow, that's right.
I love the artwork in Deathblow. I don't really remember much about the book itself, but for me personally, I like it when Jim's working on single character books rather than team books. But he gets, you think the detail in X-Men is something else when he doesn't have to draw like 5 people in a panel. God damn, you get something really
it gets
special.
Intense, yeah.
It's really cool.
I kind of felt with the Trinity run, remember that book which happened during the countdown period of comics for DC. That felt a little too loose in his style, and I wonder.
Yeah, I thought Hush was a bit loose for what I would normally get out of Jim Lee too. So.
Yeah, I wonder if it's because he's getting older, styles changed, or he's running like Wildstorm, and like he's doing a lot right now. Like he's kind of like moved up from the artist into a bigger position, like a lot of them do, right?
One of the big 5 guys at DC now. Like, yeah,
too busy.
Yeah,
too busy to really put the time in. What would be? I know, and I've told Blaine this 100 times. I know my number one want for artists to meet, but who would be your artist to meet that hasn't shown up yet? Blaine, pay attention.
Okay, for me, probably Alex Ross.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, since my number one's already happened, and I've met Stan Lee, I've met a lot. I've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of guys I admire in the business, but Alex Ross is probably the new number one on my list to meet. The art that he does. I mean, it's very unlikely that any kind of commission thing would happen, nor could I afford it.
Yeah.
But, just to show my appreciation for his work, because I pretty much pick up any book he's done the artwork in. So.
Yeah, or even the cover. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I love it. I've done that too. I've got prints, and it's funny how much stuff I've actually bought of Alex's, and none of it's hanging on my wall. Actually, no, that's not true. I've got a signed print that came with a statue, which is funny because I don't have the statue, but I was at a DC summit, and they handed those out to the attendees. So that was pretty cool that I got this signed Alex Ross print. So it's the only thing I've got, but I didn't get it signed in person, so I need to meet him and just say, hey, thanks, man.
Yeah, I need his John Hancock and a handshake for sure on my ratty string coming out of the binding copy of Kingdom Come. Mm-hmm. I bought a first print trade. That's how I read it. I didn't know it came out in those 4 prestige issues or whatever. Yeah. But I brought it. I remember meeting Mark Waid wrote it, and it's so incredible. But I met him and I was like a little embarrassed because my copy is just fucked, right? I don't know how it's still holding together because I've had it since it was released. I can't remember when, mid-90s. I've read it forever, traveled with me through, from living with my parents to my own place to my house now. Like I still have it. And I was embarrassed. I was like, I'm kind of embarrassed to show you this because it's so worn out. I don't think it even has corners anymore. And he was like, no, it's nice to see that you've loved it. Right? You love my work, and it shows in the book because it's so beat up. He's like, you didn't just go and buy it from one of these vendors because I'm here. And I was like, totally. And I mean, Mark Waid, he can do no wrong. Anything he writes, I'm always down to read. Alex Ross, speaking of conventions, so I went in 2009, as a gift from my wife, I went to the San Diego Comic-Con. And she gave me an envelope full of spending cash and flew me down there with some friends. And it actually was my bachelor party. And we went, and Alex Ross was in the guest list. And I was like, holy shit, right? Wow. Like, that would have been a fanboy moment. And I went and I hunted through this sea of television and studio bullshit and movie stuff. Like, it's not really it is where our Calgary Expo is going, where it's getting away from that comic book anchored
I get that
pop culture thing.
That's what's going to really attract the audience.
The more it'll make ticket sales.
We're talking comics but on a movie show, but we're big fans of comics and movies.
Yeah.
And for part of me thinks that they should be separated. In some ways, I guess the Calgary Expo kind of is, where they've got
2 buildings
segregated now into different rooms and buildings and things like that. But
I think they should be equally represented.
Yeah,
and it's getting a little skewed. But definitely,
San Diego certainly become
20% of the vendors were comic book, which was fantastic. But getting back to Alex Ross, so I find, and it's massive. My God, that convention center is probably 8 blocks long, and I find it, and it's alexrossart.com.
Oh.
He was not there. As far as comic book go, I found my holy grail comic book the first hour of the first day because we went on preview night. So you pay extra for your... I don't even think you can get a ticket to this show anymore, but at the time we bought the 4-day pass, you get preview night. So they released, like Hasbro released an exclusive Transformer, and there was an exclusive Stay Puft Piggy Bank. And so all these exclusives, right? So the door is open and 100,000 people rush in to go get the exclusives. So it's like me and 3 other guys in the comic book area. I had free run of the place, no pressure, and I walk up to the first booth. And I'm like, I have one comic on my list. One. I said, I want an Action 252. First appearance, Supergirl. DC Comics, 59. And he had one. And I was like, oh my God, right? Like, I had been looking probably to this point 10 years to try and get one. And from 2004 to 2009, I mean, I was doing every convention in Alberta. No one has this book. It's the only one I've ever seen, and the only one I've ever seen since.
I had one in my shop about a year ago, but it was in such rough shape I couldn't pick it up. I couldn't actually sell it with and still have any kind of morals left.
Yeah, it was just a rag.
It was so terrible, and it broke my heart to give it back to the guy. But I'm like, I couldn't do anything with it. Pages were they had it had molded, and pages were sticking together, and big hunks were taken. It was the worst shape you could actually conceive of, and I just yeah.
So below a 1.
Yeah, it was still kind of moist too, so it was like, ugh, I'm probably going to kill somebody if I sell it to them. So
and some of the less reputable guys would put good plus, right?
No, I turned it down, and it was hard to do, but I'm like, yeah, gotta let it go.
Such an iconic cover with Supergirl coming out of the purple rocket, Superman aghast that a woman could have powers. It is just not only the first appearance of my number one favorite superhero, but a shining example of sexism in comics and misogyny in comics that existed in the 50s and 60s, which is a passion of mine. And I actually have quite
misogyny is not a passion
in the comics, the pop culture, yeah. And I have quite a big collection of DC stuff that like you would never get away with, but it was socially acceptable, right? It's interesting. But anyway, this guy had this book, and
a product of its time, and there's snapshots of that time.
Totally.
Yeah.
I would grade that book, you know, conservatively 5.5, 6. Nice book, right?
Yeah, good mid-grade.
I bought it for $200 US.
Oh, steal.
A total steal.
Yeah.
And it's worth exponentially more now, and it wouldn't matter. It could be worth $100,000. I wouldn't sell it unless I was like destitute.
Yeah,
but it was
I don't know how well that TV show's doing, but if it's doing
good,
even
apparently
moderately well, it'll also help your value.
Oh yeah. But it doesn't matter. I mean, all my Supergirl books aren't for sale. Like it isn't an option to sell them.
Yeah.
And it was a thrill to get it. But San Diego, like after that day, that the preview night, because there's so many people and there's such a focus on other aspects of pop culture, and it's not like I don't like it. I mean, I saw the Black Beauty from Green Hornet, the new movie we hadn't seen yet, so we didn't know how terrible that was going to be. But the car is beautiful. All the suits from Iron Man 2 were on display.
That's super cool.
Christian Bale's armor from Batman Begins was on display, which was like, as a Batman fan, it was crazy. All of the production Puppet Master dolls were on display at Full Moon's booth.
Wow.
And they were gigantic.
Yeah.
I was surprised how big they were. And then that was crazy to see. And like, prototype toys and what's coming for Hasbro and Mattel and whatever. I mean, that was sort of cool to see. Lots of big television studios represented and video game companies represented. I remember at that time I was playing a online game called City of Heroes, and they had a big setup and they were giving away freebies and stuff, whatever. So yeah, San Diego was an experience, but honestly, like we did the preview night and we were burned out. And the next day we just did stuff in San Diego. You know, we did the zoo and went to SeaWorld and whatever. And we went back the Saturday because another bucket list item was there. The second love of my life next to my wife is my future ex-wife, Elvira. She was future former. She was there, and I had to go back. And you know what? There was like no line. I waited like 10 minutes, and this is funny. She's so great. I'm gonna cry. She's so great. But so I go to meet her. And it said no post photography, and she wasn't in costume. She was Cassandra Peterson, right?
Yeah.
Red hair, tiny girl, right? Whatever. So no post photography. I had the Marvel one-shot movie adaptation, the magazine-sized comic book, with the incredible Joe Jusko cover.
Yeah.
Guess who was also at San Diego? Joe Jusko. Got to meet him. He's awesome. He has this crazy Brooklyn accent. He's an ex-cop and one of the greatest painters, but standing up there with Ross for sure.
I'm glad your experience went better than
he was so cool, man.
Yeah.
And so I bring it up.
It wasn't so cool for me, but
no.
no. He's got these weird times when he just works on commissions, and so you'll walk up and he'll
talk to you.
He won't talk to you or interact with you. He'll just tap the sign, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of rude.
Yeah,
I didn't dig that. So
he was super nice to me.
I never did get my signature.
No, he signed my Elvira comic, and the Hulk trading card from the Masterpiece set from '93. Like,
very cool.
Remember those?
Yeah.
So I bring the magazine up for Elvira to sign, and she signs it, and she goes, "Oh, is this the artist's signature?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Oh, is he here?" So she probably went and found him after, but she told me that piece was her favorite piece of art. And if you think that like Olivia's done art of her and a ton of really skilled artists, to like really love that comic-y style is cool.
Yeah. So
no post photography, and I said, "Well, can I shake your hand?"
Yeah.
And she said, "Sure." So I get to shake her hand. And while I've got her hand, I said, I'm visiting from Canada, and my wife said the only woman I was allowed to touch while I was down here is you. And she takes her sunglasses off and she looks me dead in the eye and she goes, "Oh shit, I hope you don't get herpes."
Oh, wow! That probably just crushed the soul of a whole bunch of people.
It was awesome. It was awesome. And then actually, I got to meet her twice again. At she came to Calgary, and I went both days. And my friend Scott works with the guests, and as usually is like at that time I think he was security.
Yeah, so we both know Scott.
You know Scott.
Yeah.
So I showed up to her line, and it was big, and I'm a vendor. So, and then Scott grabs me, because he's my friend, and he just puts me at the front of the line. He's like, VIP, blah, 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 right? Just pissed off like 500 people. It was awesome. I get in line, and I buy the little 45 record of her new theme song, because her new show was coming out at the time, whatever. And I didn't know this, but Scott had told her to tell me that she wasn't allowed to sign those, and like, just screw with me, right? And so I buy it, whatever, it was $40 or something like that. And I had something else as well. And I was like, oh, I met you in San Diego. Huge fan, whatever, blah, 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 gushy fanboy bullshit. And she was like, oh, no, I'm not allowed to sign these. And I thought, oh, well, maybe because it's like this product or this other band. So I was just like totally cool with it. But she was just like, oh, no, I can't do it. This guy told me to fuck with you and whatever, right? And
it wasn't working.
Yeah. And then she's like, oh, do you want a photo? And like, she was doing photo ops, but she wasn't in costume. Yeah. I've actually never seen her in costume. We took a photo right at the booth, and Scott took it with his camera as well as my phone. And I don't know, Scott, if you're listening, if he knows how to work a fucking camera, but it was taking forever. And I'm standing there, and I've got my arm around her. And she's like, oh, and she was worried about the banner and stuff. Oh, well, they need to know who I am. I'm like, I know who you are. It doesn't matter, right? And she was like, oh, I'm sorry. It's taking so long. And I'm like, got my arm around Elvira. I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, take it's all good, right? Like, it's no big deal.
The hand's starting to wander.
Yeah, it's starting to wander. I got restless arm syndrome. Sorry.
I don't know how it landed on your ass. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, all of my artist and actor interactions at shows have been awesome. I've had to do with some douchebaggy vendors as a vendor. Guys trying to scalp your shit and buy it from you.
Yeah, I don't think there's been a show yet where I haven't had to deal with that as a vendor. And, I think it will probably... every Calgary Expo, as a fan that I've gone to, there's been one douchey guest to me.
It's just you.
No, just one out of the entire 4 days that I'm there. And, you got to try to not let that ruin your time there and just blow it off, because, they are there under a lot of demand by other people as well. So it doesn't always leave them in the best of moods at times if they've interacted with somebody not cool.
Yeah, if someone's a real asshole.
And sometimes that rubs back on you. And sometimes their natural demeanor isn't the coolest. I think the world of Bruce Timm. He is a very kind of gruff person. But that's okay. I had no problem with that, because I know that about him going in. And I can see how that might put some people off. But, he's pretty cool. Like, you just, as long as you know that about him going in, then you're fine.
Totally. I had heard from some people before I got a chance to meet him that another amazing artist who, like, totally reinvented a character, Neil Adams, of course, reinventing Batman in the 70s and giving us the Dark Knight that we all know and love now. No more fighting chimps and aliens or whatever bullshit in the 60s. I had heard that Neil Adams was kind of a dick. And I have gone to see him every day of every convention that he's been in Calgary.
And he's been here for quite a few.
Always awesome.
He's an absolute
super nice dude.
Gentleman.
Yeah.
He's one of the big guns in this business and does carry a bit of an ego with him, and that's okay. It's well earned, and I've had the pleasure of talking to him more than once, and I could sit there an entire weekend and listen to him talk about himself.
Totally, because that's what you want to hear about, right?
And it's amazing. Yeah. My God, he's just absolutely amazing. And, if you appreciate comics, go talk to the man.
You have to. He's such an interesting guy. I brought him my Treasury
Just don't ask him about his theory about the formation of the world.
Oh, I have met a few guys like that at shows. That's a whole podcast could be dedicated to a guy I met in Lethbridge.
I actually heard it on a podcast.
Oh, did you?
And it's fascinating. I like it. He's
little insane.
Not a scientist. I'm going to say that right now. And only if you're brave and have a few hours to kill, maybe you should go and do that. But
that was Billy West in Lethbridge.
Yeah.
Like, he would, if you got him started, he would just talk forever, and it was so fascinating because, like, you hear Fry and you hear Stimpy, and you forget that he's like 60 or older. Lots of experiences. Him and I talked at length about how difficult it was to be a fan as youngsters. And I mean, I can't even imagine when he was young growing up in New York. He said that wherever he, or sorry, it might not be New York. I think it was, or Brooklyn maybe or something. But he said that there was like one other guy who liked comics, and he like packed his books up and went looking for this guy and made friends because it was so rare to find somebody who shared a passion for comics and for cartoons and whatever, right? And that resonates with me, and I'm sure with you too, that you had your like little core group of friends that like, know what Gambit's real name is and know who Jim Lee is and like all this stuff.
Rennie LeBeau.
Yeah, Rennie LeBeau. Or could tell you what the difference between Venom and Carnage is and the issue numbers that they appeared in. It's a small group of people.
It is.
Especially as teenagers. And we talked a lot about being a fan, how hard it was to be a fan, being bullied because of it. Talked a lot about bullying. And he's a very tiny guy. He's like 5'3". He's vegan, so he doesn't weigh anything. Sorry, Cody. And yeah, it was so fascinating to talk, and it really resonated with me because like nowadays, it's everywhere, which is good and bad because then the conventions. I'm gonna rant now. Sorry, guys. The conventions start to fill up with people who watch Walking Dead on AMC and they buy a Green Lantern t-shirt at Walmart for $7 because it looks cool, or they saw it on Big Bang Theory. They're not passionate about this kind of stuff, and they still don't understand. And I feel that there's the core group of us that are really, passionate, dedicated fans who take the time to know and love all of this stuff. And then there's just like these interlopers who are like, well, I saw it on TV. It's pretty cool. I want to meet the guy who plays Arrow. And I'm like, yeah, fucking tell me Arrow's real name. In the comics, who's his girlfriend, who did an 80-issue fucking run in the 80s of the greatest Green Arrow books we'll ever see. You can't tell me any of that shit.
Yeah.
I know
can answer every one of those questions.
Totally, right?
And yeah, you get this little sense of loss, like there's something that's personal has been kind of taken away from you. And, it's not yours specifically, but you can't help but feel like, this private joy of mine is no longer private, and they're never going to, see it the way we see it.
Totally. It doesn't mean anything to them,
Yeah.
And then those are the people that don't go and see George Perez. They don't go and shake Neil Adams' hand. They don't ask Mike Mignola why Hellboy had a fish in the original drawing. Like, they don't care about that stuff.
Yeah, they didn't sit and watch the documentary on voice actors on Netflix
which is awesome. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, that's a great documentary, and docs on history of comic books. And,
or they watch Comic Book Men and go, hey, comic books are worth some money. I'm going to speculatively buy, what was it, that guy at the comic shop, 2
Kevin
or 3
Smith,
issues of it.
I love your movies, but I hate that fucking show. You're ruining my life.
Yeah, I enjoy the show because like when they do their shots, I'm not really paying attention to what's happening on screen. I'm looking at all the shit up on the wall. I'm like, whoa, look at that.
Well, now anytime somebody walks into my shop, it's just like Comic Book Man.
It is exactly like that. Speaking of comic book stores and how hard an industry it is, like I said, I had a store and I couldn't keep it open. It's a difficult industry.
It certainly is.
To stay in, which is a testament to all of our shops in Calgary. I mean, as far as I know, with the exception of maybe Alpha everybody's 20 plus years in this business, right?
Words and Pictures were 2 years away from our 30th.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I've been at it 20 myself, over 20 myself. So.
I can't remember if it's Phoenix or Red Skull that's the oldest. Is it Phoenix?
No. They were actually younger than we are. I do believe it's Another Dimension.
Is the oldest?
In town, yeah.
Yeah, that could be. Well, it was interesting to talk to Jay because, of course, anybody who knows
But there's some predate them as well, like that aren't around.
Comic Quest and things like that.
Yeah, Comic Quest and Grappa Takes a Trip, and that's a fun thing. The local history too. It's something that's going to be unique for every city, and the comic fans know that stuff. Right?
We're just throwing this out here on the show. You and I should do a documentary one. You should go around and interview all these comic shops. It would be fascinating, and I'm friends with everybody, so it would be easy to do.
Yeah,
but it is fascinating history and. Thinking of comic book shops and longevity and not being able to keep mine open and whatever, and then I drive by, Hemp World, and I'm like, well, fuck, right? There's 50 of these, but my toy store couldn't stay open. Whatever.
There's one in our old location.
Yeah, exactly. My old location is a fucking vape shop now.
Oh, it's close enough.
Yeah, so holy stab me in the heart.
So we both got
yeah. But
tweakers
talking to Jay, so Jay and Silent Bob's Secret Stash.
Yeah.
Right? Well-known comic book shop in Jersey where those guys are from. They don't live there anymore.
They're very cool.
As far as I know, Walt runs the whole show there.
Yeah.
He's the Lon Chaney of the 90s. He's about 40 different characters in Clerks. They talk about him, Walt Flanagan's dog and all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So Walt runs the shop, whatever, comic book man, cool show. But Jay said that they had opened another location and they couldn't keep it open.
Yeah. Yeah, I do remember that.
Right?
Yeah, and you'd think, especially built on celebrities, that would be a no-brainer. But, it's a hard business. It's a hard business, and I've kind of done the math on it, too. You need a certain population just to support it, and then you got to fraction that population for who's going to actually come into your shop, because that's a pretty small portion of the population. So I'm always fascinated when a smaller town that like we have in Lethbridge and Red Deer have comic book shops, because at best they could probably only support one.
Yeah.
And if another one opened up, they'd probably both go under.
We're super lucky in Calgary that we have 8 or 9 shops, and they're all great.
Yeah. But
all
it's a big population.
It's a big population, and I like that with the increased awareness of the culture with the media and the TV, that you do get that trickle of new, so that that industry is going to last longer now with all this new stuff. Like when I was loitering in your shop last week, that girl came in who was an old customer, and she brought her kid. And like, I remember being that. Do you remember the stack he had?
Yeah.
I want all of these. She's like, you only have $20. He's like, no. Yeah, it was awesome to see like people. And anytime I go to a shop,
I now know kids who have had kids. I remember when they were young, and now they're bringing their kids in. I'm like, I've been at it that long now.
Yeah.
And it's pretty cool. And like, I don't consider myself very old, so I was pretty young when I started.
You were 5?
Not that. Yeah. I'm older than I sound.
Yeah,
I'm older than I look too.
Me too. Yeah.
That's the thing about comics. We age well.
Yeah, that's right. It's all the must from the paper. Right?
That's right.
See, it doesn't, like when you're buying new books, no, but once you go back and you start buying the old Silver and Bronze Age stuff, there's a certain feel and smell, and I don't know, it's a very tactile. What was it Stan Lee said about digital comic books? He said,
nobody's ever going to smell an iPad. I don't know what he said.
No. There's a Stan Lee quote about digital comic books, because I remember when digital comics were coming, and I was like, well, that's not going to fly, because digital media is temporary, not permanent. I mean, I have a book from 1958. I can hold it in my hand. This is from 1958. It's still around. I can give it to you. I can sell it to somebody. I can keep it forever. I can be buried with it, probably. Just, Heather, so you know. Buried with it.
I'm digging them up just to get that Supergirl.
Yeah. So
you best die before me.
Digital media will always exist, but it's just like movies. Netflix has 10,000 movies.
Yeah.
Well,
and the language of comics is very specific. I think that's one of the reasons why digital books haven't overtaken the print. Like a lot of its entertainment contemporaries, we're seeing books are moving over into Kindle and stuff, and it doesn't really change the language of it. A book is still a book on a Kindle. It's just text. And movies don't really change on an iPad outside of the size of it. It's still the same product. Mm-hmm. But in comic books, they are created for a specific formatted page. And the widescreen of an iPad or a computer is not those dimensions.
No, it's really hard to get into
else. And it changes the specific flow of the panels. It is designed for the printed page, and that language is very specific. And it's probably why it hasn't taken off as much as it has. It's still a growth market, but I don't think it's ever going to overtake the printed version of the printed comic book.
And what happens when they have direct-to-digital comics? You get a print version.
You get the print version, absolutely.
Because people want to keep it and
we're starting to see some exceptions to the rule. I think there's actually more people reading Marvel's Miss Marvel book digitally than in print. The print numbers are probably okay. Like she's a character that seems to be gaining in popularity all the time, but... Mm-hmm. From the numbers I'm hearing, she's doing obscenely well, digitally speaking. So, and I think that's a case of the character reaching regions and an audience that might not go into a comic shop or might not have one. And I think,
but then they'll want to.
Yeah, and I think that's probably specific for the digital audience as a whole. Because God knows, I've actually gained customers because their first comic book, which is crazy to even think about, was a digital one. Mm-hmm. But they want to know the real thing. I read this digitally, but I don't have anything. Like, I want that book. I loved it that much.
Yeah, totally.
How do you love that iPad? You can't.
It's like guys
just buy
who
a bunch of iPads and throw it on your shelf.
It's like guys who want first editions of books and stuff, right? It's the same thing. I found the quote. So Stan Lee was asked if online comics would replace actual books, and he said, "Comics are like boobs. They look great on a computer, but I'd rather hold one in my hand."
Well, that sounds like an amazing quote to close on. I can't beat that. So we're going to close on that quote. And I'm Jason, and for Trish, I'll say, hey, she's not here. I'll say goodbye for her as well.
I'm Jeff, and I'll see you at the next convention.
That's right. We're always at the conventions. So especially if you're hitting up Calgary in April. Probably the whole gang will be there, and we might actually have cards so you hand out for the show. And of course, if you like this episode, please tell your friends, like, share, and subscribe. And please rate and review us on iTunes. It certainly helps us out, helps us in the ranks, and only takes you a second to do it. So please do that for us. Do us that solid. If you want to write us at the talk to us at the show directly, we have a Twitter account at Invasion Remake, Invasion of the Remake over on Facebook, and of course Invasion of the Remake at gmail.com. So go check all that stuff out, and tell your friends. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, PlayerFM, TuneIn, and a whole bunch of stuff, and coming soon Google Play. So we'll be there as well. And that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next week. We'll be back to the movies. So,
back to the movies.
We're out of here.
Noise, smoking weed, doing coke, drinking beers. Pack her ass, my good man. Time to kick back, drink some beers, and smoke some weed.